During the height of the Cold War, while everyone's eyes were on America's race to the moon, the Soviet Union was secretly launching these absolutely terrifying missions to a completely different world. Their target wasn't the moon, it was our neighbor, Venus. And these were, for all intents and purposes, suicide missions, just sending probe after probe to a place they knew almost nothing about. But what they found there, well, it was so horrifying, so completely hellish, that after decades of this relentless effort, they just stopped. They abandoned the planet. So that's the big mystery we're diving into today. What exactly did the Soviets find on Venus that made them never, ever return?
So, let's set the scene. It's the 1960s, and the space race is in full swing. America, of course, famously aimed for the moon. But the Soviets, they turned their attention to a much more mysterious prize, Venus. For them, it was all about conquering the true unknown.
And you gotta remember, at the time, scientists really thought of Venus as Earth's potential twin. It's a similar size, similar distance from the sun, but its surface, a total mystery, completely hidden by this thick blanket of clouds. For all anyone knew, under those clouds could be anything. Oceans, forests, maybe even alien life. The potential for discovery was just immense, Arguably a much bigger prize than the moon. And so they started the Venera program. That's the Russian word for Venus. But they immediately slammed into a wall of just brutal, unforgiving failure. Turns out, just getting to Venus was one of the most difficult challenges in human history. I mean, the program's early track record was a straight-up disaster. Their first shot in 1961 didn't even escape Earth's orbit. Venera 1 went dead silent just a week into its flight. Venera 2 did the exact same thing. And there were so many other catastrophic failures that the Soviets refused to even name them. They called them ghost missions. It wasn't until 1966 that Venera 3 finally reached the planet, only to crash into the surface, a dead probe. And through all these failures, the Soviet scientists realized something really important was happening. This wasn't just, a wire coming loose. Their probes were being actively destroyed, annihilated, crushed like soda cans long before they could ever hit the ground. The Venusian atmosphere itself, that was the enemy. So they had to change tactics. The result was a probe called Venera 7. And this thing, it was designed less like a scientific instrument and more like an armored tank. Seriously, its one and only mission was to survive. Forget fancy experiments, its whole purpose was to just withstand whatever was wiping out its predecessors. So as Venera 7 is plunging through these clouds, sending back this tiny, faint radio signal, scientists on the ground noticed something weird. The frequency of the signal was shifting. By calculating this, what's called the Doppler effect, they realized some invisible force was violently shoving the probe sideways as it fell. What was that force? Oh, just hurricane winds roaring at 360 kilometers per hour. This was the first piece of the horrifying puzzle, a global, permanent storm, way stronger than any hurricane we have here on Earth. But get this, that wasn't even what was crushing the probes. Venera 7's data showed that the atmospheric pressure was a staggering 90 times greater than on Earth's surface. To put that in perspective, that's like being a full kilometer deep in the ocean, just an unimaginable crushing weight. And then came the final blow. Venera 7 survived on the surface for only 23 minutes, but that was long enough to send back the temperature, 465 degrees Celsius. That is twice as hot as your kitchen oven and hot enough to literally melt lead. They had found it. They had found hell. Now, you'd think that learning Venus was a toxic, high-pressure oven with permanent super hurricanes might make someone, stop. But not the Soviets. No way. They were more determined than ever. They had measured the hellish conditions, now they wanted to see them, and they wanted to hear them. So, Venera 9 was the next big leap. In 1975, after all the failures and all the terrifying data, humanity got its first ever glimpse of the surface of another planet. And the image it sent back was just profoundly alien. It wasn't some sandy desert like people imagined. It was a landscape of sharp, broken, threatening-looking rocks under this dim, oppressive sky. But this incredible triumph was immediately followed by just maddening frustration. See, each lander had two cameras. On Venera 9, only one lens cap popped off. Then on Venera 10, the exact same thing happened. Then, unbelievably, on Venera 11 and 12, Both lens caps failed to open. These multi-million-dollar probes survived for over an hour on the surface, sending back all this great data, but they were totally blind. The tragic comedy really peaked with Venera 14. It had this spring-loaded arm designed to test how hard the soil was. But when the camera's lens cap was ejected, where did it land? In the exact spot where the arm was supposed to test the ground. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. This multi-million-dollar instrument ended up measuring the hardness of its own lens cap. But then came Venera 13, and it was a stunning success. It finally delivered on everything they'd hoped for. For the first time, we saw Venus in color, this oppressive orange sky over brownish rock. It deployed a microphone and recorded the first sounds ever captured on another world, the low roar of the wind and the distant crackle of lightning. It even drilled into the surface, confirming that the planet has its own version of earthquakes. So, after these incredible, hard-won victories on the ground, the final phase of the Venera program switched up its strategy. They realized that landing probes was just way too risky and way too expensive. It was time to map the entire planet from the safety of orbit. The last two missions, Venera 15 and 16, were decked out with powerful radar that could finally slice right through the planet's thick, corrosive clouds. For 8 months, they just circled Venus, methodically mapping its hidden surface. And they revealed a world covered in towering mountains, up to 8 kilometers high, and massive cracks stretching for thousands of kilometers. So the Venera program, through just unbelievable perseverance, built this definitive case against Venus. You have a surface hot enough to melt machinery, pressure that crushes metal like a tin can, a toxic atmosphere with clouds made of sulfuric acid, and constant violent storms. What they found wasn't just another world, but a profound, terrifying lesson, a vision of a runaway greenhouse effect, showing us what can happen when a planet's climate just spirals completely out of control. Their dedication was just incredible. I mean, over 2 decades, the Soviet Union sent 18 missions, spent billions of dollars, and endured failure after failure after failure. They really earned the right to call Venus the Soviet planet. And in the end, they had an answer to their original question: what lies beneath the clouds? Their answer was clear, definitive, and absolutely terrifying. They showed us a vision of hell right next door in our own solar system. And this really leaves us with one final provocative question. After everything they discovered, who would ever dare to go back?